I shot my first deer when I was 7 years old. My father, Thomas Thorne, put the Remington 700 in my hands on a Tuesday morning in November, showed me where to press my cheek against the stock, where to breathe, when to squeeze. The deer was 100 yards out, grazing near a frozen creek. I remember the weight of the rifle, heavier than anything I had ever held. I remember my father's hand on my shoulder, steady, warm through my jacket. "Don't pull," he said. "Squeeze. Like you are holding something precious that might break." I squeezed. The deer dropped. My father died when I was 12. Drove his truck into a tree at 60 miles an hour on a clear day with good roads and no reason anyone could point to. The coroner ruled it accidental. I knew better. I had watched him fade for 5 years after my mother left, after she would run off with some insurance salesman from Denver she had been seeing in secret. I was 9 when I walked into our kitchen and saw them together. My mother and him, the stranger, hands where they shouldn't be, her laughing in a way she never laughed with my father. She looked at me, and instead of shame or guilt, I saw anger flash across her face, like I was the problem. Like I had ruined something by existing. The divorce took 6 months. My father got quieter every day, stayed in the woods longer, came home later, started drinking, stopped talking. I would find him sitting in the dark, staring at nothing, and I knew he was thinking about her, about betrayal, about how the one person you are supposed to trust most in the world can destroy you from the inside out. Then he didn't come home at all. Just him, his truck, and a tree. No note, no explanation. But I understood. He had given everything to one woman, trusted her completely, and she had taken that trust and used it to break him into pieces too small to put back together. I learned my lesson early. Women are the source of pain. They lie, they cheat, they take what is good and turn it to poison. That is not bitterness. That is observation, pattern recognition, science. I am 50 now. I have lived in these mountains for 38 years, alone except for Kodiak, my husky, and the ghosts that don't talk back. I hunt because it is what I know. I stay in the woods because it is safer here. No betrayal, no lies, just survival, clean and simple. My cabin sits at 9,800 feet in the Rocky Mountains, 2 hours north of any road that sees regular traffic, 4 hours from anything you would call civilization. Colorado in its raw, frozen, indifferent glory. The walls are pine logs my father cut before I was born. The roof is tin that sounds like God drumming his fingers when it rains. In winter, which up here lasts about 9 months, the snow piles 6 feet high against the north wall, and the temperature drops low enough that your breath crystallizes before it hits the ground. I like it that way, cold and clean and honest. It was a Tuesday, because things in my life always seemed to happen on Tuesdays, when I met Shadow. The morning started normal. I woke to Kodiak's cold nose pressed against my face at 5:47 a.m., which was his subtle way of saying he needed to piss, and also I was a lazy piece of shit for sleeping past dawn. Fair enough. I rolled out of my sleeping bag, pulled on 3 layers. Thermal underwear that had seen better decades, a fleece my father wore in the 70s, and a down jacket that was more duct tape than fabric at this point, and stepped outside into air so cold it felt like inhaling broken glass. The thermometer nailed to the cabin wall read -15 Fahrenheit. Wind chill probably knocked it down to -30. The sky was that perfect pale blue you only get in the high country. The kind of blue that makes you understand why people write poetry about mountains. Me? I just grunted. Watched Kodiak bound through the snow to do his business, and started thinking about coffee. Kodiak's a good dog, 105 pounds of Siberian husky, built like a small bear, with pale blue eyes that see too much and a coat so thick he could sleep in a snowbank and wake up warm. I got him as a pup 8 years ago from a musher down in Fairplay who was retiring. Kodiak's great-grandfather ran the Iditarod. You can see it in the way he moves through snow, efficient, tireless, like he was designed by engineers specifically for this environment. He is also a massive pain in the ass. Stubborn as hell, loud, dramatic, and convinced he is the funniest creature on 4 legs. He came bounding back from the tree line, stopped 10 feet from the cabin, and started barking at absolutely nothing. "Kodiak," I said, "cut it out." He barked again, staring at me like I was the idiot for not seeing the obvious threat. There is nothing there. He tilted his head, did his signature move where he looks deeply offended that I would doubt him, and barked a 3rd time for emphasis. Then he spun in a circle and pissed on the woodpile. "Thanks for that," I said. "Really appreciate the contribution." He wagged his tail. "You are welcome," his expression said. I went back inside, started a fire in the wood stove, put water on for coffee. The cabin's small, maybe 400 square feet, 1 room with a loft for sleeping. Everything I own fits in here: clothes, tools, books, rifles, traps, dried food, and a lifetime supply of solitude. The walls are covered with maps, notes about game trails, weather patterns, the kinds of things you learn when you spend 43 years studying one piece of land. Coffee finished brewing. I poured it into a chipped mug that said "World's Greatest Dad" on the side. A joke my father found at a yard sale decades ago. I was drinking it black, staring at the map on the east wall and planning the day's hunt, when Kodiak started barking again. This time it was different. Not the playful, "Hey, look at me, I am bored" bark. The serious bark. The "something's actually wrong" bark. I grabbed the Remington 700, my father's rifle and my inheritance, loaded 3 rounds of .30-06, and stepped outside. The valley below my cabin was white. Not just white, but that absolute, obliterating white you get after a fresh snowfall when the sun hits it just right, and everything becomes one continuous field of glare. The spruce trees were dark shapes against it, the creek a ribbon of black where the water still moved too fast to freeze. Beautiful, deadly. The kind of landscape that kills you if you are not paying attention, and sometimes even if you are. Kodiak was standing at the edge of the clearing, staring into the trees about 50 yards out. His hackles were up, ears forward, body tense, like a coiled spring. I moved up beside him, slow and deliberate, kept the rifle ready. "What would you see, buddy?" he growled, low in his chest. That is when I saw them. Wolves, a full pack, maybe 10 or 12 of them, arranged in a loose semicircle in the shadows of the spruce trees, barely visible against the snow and darkness. Their eyes caught the light, reflecting like small coins. They weren't moving, just watching, waiting. I have seen wolves before, plenty of times. Colorado's got a decent population now, reintroduced back in the 90s, doing well in the high country. They usually avoid humans, keep their distance, mind their own business. This was different. This was deliberate. This was calculated, and they were starving. You could see it in the way they stood. Ribs visible through their fur even at this distance. Eyes a little too bright. Movements a little too careful, like every step cost them energy they couldn't afford. This winter had been brutal, 6 months already, and showing no signs of breaking. The cold had been relentless, the snow deeper than any year I could remember. Game was scarce. I had noticed it myself over the past few weeks. Deer moving lower to find food. Elk disappearing entirely. The mountain was getting emptier. The wolves were desperate. One of them stepped forward, separating itself from the pack. This one was different. Bigger, for starters, probably 120 pounds of pure muscle and will, where the others were gray and brown and modeled for forest camouflage. This one was almost pure white, not the dingy yellow white of old snow, but clean, bright white, like fresh powder under moonlight. Its eyes were pale blue, almost silver, and when it looked at me I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: recognition. Not like it knew me personally, more like it recognized something in me. Another predator, another survivor, another creature that understood the brutal math of winter. Survive or die, and most things die. Kodiak snarled. Hackles fully up now, every muscle coiled and ready. The white wolf's gaze shifted to him, held for a moment, then came back to me. It took another step forward, slow and deliberate. The pack tensed but didn't follow. This one was the alpha. No question. I raised the rifle, slow, brought it to my shoulder. That is close enough. The wolf stopped. We stared at each other across 50 yards of snow and cold and the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. The wind had died completely. Even the creek seemed quieter. Just me and this white wolf, and a moment that felt suspended outside of normal time. Then, and I have replayed this moment 1,000 times trying to make sense of it, the wolf did something I have never seen in 38 years of living in these mountains. It lay down, not in a crouch, not ready to spring, not holding a defensive position. It lay flat on its belly, paws stretched forward, head down, and rolled slightly to the side to expose its throat and stomach. Complete vulnerability, complete submission. But not to me, for the pack. I have read enough about wolf behavior to know what I was seeing. Wolves have hierarchies, systems, rules, written into their DNA over thousands of years. Alphas lead, protect, make decisions. But when times get desperate, when the pack is starving and there is no food and winter will not break, nature has a protocol. The alpha offers itself, not because it is weak, because it is strong enough to understand sacrifice, its life for the survival of the pack. This wolf was offering itself as food. I lowered the rifle slightly, staring. The wolf's pale blue eyes stayed on me, clear and calm and absolutely steady. It wasn't begging. It wasn't afraid. It was negotiating. One clean shot, quick and painless, and the pack could feed for days. Maybe long enough to make it to spring, maybe long enough to survive. Behind it, the pack waited, still as statues carved from ice. They understood what was happening. I could see it in their postures, their eyes, waiting to see if their alpha's sacrifice would be accepted. I thought about my father, about the truck and the tree and the choice between living broken or dying whole, about giving everything for someone else and whether that was strength or weakness, about what it meant to put others before yourself even when it cost you everything. I thought for maybe 30 seconds. Then I made a decision that would change my life forever. I walked back to the cabin, slow, keeping my movements visible and non-threatening. The wolves watched but didn't move. I went inside, grabbed the deer haunch I had hung from the rafters 2 days ago, a good 20 pounds of venison frozen solid, and carried it back out. The white wolf had lifted its head slightly, watching. I held up the meat so it could see, then threw it as hard as I could toward the pack. It sailed through the air and landed with a heavy thump in the snow, about halfway between us. The white wolf looked at the meat, looked at me, stood up, slow and deliberate, and walked to the venison. It grabbed it in its jaws, powerful enough to carry 20 pounds like it weighed nothing, turned, and carried it back to the pack. They fell on it immediately. Not a frenzy, but controlled, organized. The alpha placed the meat down, and the pack began to feed according to hierarchy. Mothers with pups first, then the others. The white wolf stood guard, watching the perimeter, making sure they were safe while they ate. When they were done, maybe 10 minutes later, the pack began to melt back into the trees. One by one, they disappeared into the shadows and snow, fading like ghosts. The white wolf was the last to leave. It looked back at me one more time, and if I didn't know better, I had swear it nodded, a slight dip of the head. Acknowledgement, respect, gratitude. Then it turned and followed its pack into the wilderness, and they were gone. Kodiak sat down in the snow next to me. He looked up with those blue eyes and huffed once. I don't know either, I said, but it felt right. We stood there for a while, man and dog, staring at the tree line where the wolves had disappeared. The wind picked up again, carrying snow in thin sheets across the clearing. Somewhere in the distance, deep in the mountains, an avalanche rumbled. Snow breaking free from some peak, sliding down the mountain face like a slow-motion explosion of white. Normal sounds, safe sounds. The kind of sounds that meant the world was still working the way it was supposed to. I didn't know it then, but that was the last normal day I had ever have. Shadow came back 3 days later. I was splitting wood behind the cabin, working through a pile of dead spruce I had hauled up from the valley last fall. Kodiak was lying in a patch of sunlight, watching me with the lazy attention of a creature whose only job was to look pretty and occasionally bark at things. The sky was clear, the temperature a balmy 5 degrees, and I was just starting to think about lunch when Kodiak's head snapped up. He didn't bark. That was the first sign something was different. He just stared into the trees, ears forward, body suddenly alert, and made a sound I had never heard him make before. Not quite a whine, not quite a growl, something in between. Uncertainty mixed with curiosity. "What?" I said, setting down the axe. The white wolf stepped out of the trees. It was alone this time. No pack visible behind it. It moved slow, cautious, eyes locked on Kodiak, who was now standing, fur slightly raised along his spine, still making that weird in-between sound. The wolf stopped about 20 yards out from the cabin, Saturday down in the snow. Waited. "The hell do you want?" I said, which in retrospect was a stupid question to ask an animal that couldn't answer. The wolf tilted its head, studying me. I swear to God it looked amused. Kodiak took 2 steps forward and barked, sharp and loud. A warning. This is my territory, my human, my space. The wolf didn't react, just sat there in the snow, perfectly still, watching both of us with those pale blue eyes that seemed to see too much, waiting for something. I realized what. Kodiak. Heel. He looked at me like I had just asked him to solve a complex calculus problem. Rough. Translation. Are you insane? There is a wolf right there, heel now. He huffed, theatrical as hell, gave the wolf one more hard stare, then walked back to me, stiff-legged and proud, making it clear this was under protest. The wolf's gaze followed him, then shifted to me. There was something in those eyes, some kind of intelligence that made the hair on my arms stand up. Not threatening, not aggressive, just present, aware, thinking. We stayed like that for maybe 5 minutes. Man, dog, wolf, all watching each other, engaged in some kind of negotiation without words. Then the wolf stood up, slow and deliberate, turned, and walked back into the trees. That was weird, I told Kodiak. He huffed again. Understatement of the year. The wolf came back the next day. Same time, same place. Mid-morning when the sun was high enough to warm the clearing. Saturday down 20 yards out. Watched us for a few minutes, left. The day after that, same thing. By the 4th day, Kodiak had stopped growling. By the 6th day, he was barely paying attention, had accepted this as the new normal. I started calling it shadow. Not because of any deep meaning, but because that is what it did. Appeared like a shadow, watched like a shadow, disappeared like a shadow. Plus it was easier than the white wolf every time I mentioned it to Kodiak. On the 7th day, shadow saved our lives. The storm came out of nowhere, which storms don't actually do, but when you are 8 miles from your cabin chasing a wounded elk, and the sky goes from clear blue to black-gray in about 10 minutes. It feels like nowhere. I should have turned back. I knew better. 38 years in these mountains, and you learn to read weather, like you read a clock. But the elk was hurt, limping badly, probably from a fall or a fight with another bull, and a wounded animal suffers. I have got rules about suffering. If you wound it, you finish it. Period. No exceptions, so I followed it deeper into the valley, Kodiak ranging ahead tracking scent. Both of us focused on blood spots in the snow. The wind hit first. Not a gradual build, just suddenly there, 40 miles an hour gusting to 60, carrying snow and ice crystals that felt like needles against any exposed skin. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many minutes. Visibility went from half a mile to about 10 feet. The world became white noise and biting cold. I tried to retrace our steps, couldn't find them. The wind had already filled in our tracks, erased everything, turned the landscape into a blank white slate where every direction looked the same. I had my compass, my map, my years of experience, none of it mattered. You cannot navigate if you cannot see landmarks. You cannot orient if the entire world is white. At this altitude, in this cold, we had maybe 2 hours before hypothermia started doing real damage, maybe less if we couldn't find shelter. The temperature was probably -30 now with wind chill. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in minutes. Your core temperature drops. Your body starts shutting down non-essential systems to keep your heart and brain running. You get sleepy. You stop thinking clearly. You sit down in the snow to rest for just a minute, and you never get back up. I had seen it happen to others. I wasn't going to let it happen to me. Kodiak pressed against my leg, whining. His fur was caked with ice, his breath coming in short bursts, steam freezing in his whiskers. We needed shelter. Now, I found a cluster of spruce trees, their branches heavy with snow and bent low enough to create a small cavity underneath. I crawled in, pulled Kodiak close, shared body heat. It wasn't much, but it was something. A slight break from the wind. A pocket of slightly warmer air. Maybe enough to keep us alive until the storm passed. I tried to think, tried to plan. But the cold was making it hard. My thoughts were getting slower, fuzzier around the edges. Bad sign. Very bad sign. I pulled Kodiak closer. He was shivering now, which was actually good. When you stop shivering, that is when you are really in trouble. That is when your body gives up. "We are okay," I told him, voice barely audible over the wind. "Storm will pass. We just wait it out." He whined, not convinced. That is when I heard the growl, not Kodiak. Something much bigger, much deeper. The kind of growl that comes from an animal that outweighs you by 300 pounds and views you as food. I looked up, squinting through the blowing snow and spruce branches, and saw it. Grizzly bear, male, massive, probably 9 feet tall if it stood upright. 800 pounds at least. It shouldn't have been awake. Grizzlies hibernate through winter. Everyone knows that. Sleeping in dens from November to March, living off stored fat. But this one was active. And starving. Just like the wolves, climate change had fucked up the seasons. Winters starting earlier, lasting longer, spring coming later if it came at all. Animals that should be hibernating were waking up because their bodies couldn't sustain that long without food. They came out desperate and hungry and willing to eat anything, including humans. The bear took a step toward our spruce shelter, massive paws crunching in the snow. I grabbed the Remington, but my hands were shaking from cold, fingers half numb inside my gloves, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I wasn't going to be fast enough or accurate enough. This bear was going to kill us. Kodiak snarled, placed himself between me and the bear, brave and stupid and loyal to the end. The bear huffed, breath visible in the cold air, unimpressed. It was too hungry to be intimidated by a 100-pound dog. The bear reared up on its hind legs, showing its full height, easily 9 feet, and roared. The sound echoed through the storm, primal and terrifying. This was it. This was how I died, in a blizzard, hypothermic, about to be mauled by a bear. My father died in a truck. I had died in the snow. Different methods, same result. Then something white and fast hit the bear from the side. Shadow slammed into the bear's shoulder with enough force to knock it off balance. The bear roared again, surprised, and swung a massive paw. Shadow darted back, circled, teeth bared, moving with a speed and precision that didn't seem possible for something that size. The bear turned to face this new threat, and Shadow lunged again, went for the throat. Didn't get a clean bite but drew blood, dark red against white fur. The bear swung again, connected this time. The paw hit Shadow mid-leap, sent the wolf flying 6 feet through the air. Shadow hit a tree trunk with a sickening thud and collapsed in the snow, yelping. The bear turned back toward me. I shot it. My hands were still shaking. My aim was off. But at 10 feet you don't need perfect aim. The .30-06 round hit the bear in the shoulder. Not a kill shot, but enough to hurt. enough to matter. The crack of the rifle echoed through the storm. The bear reared up again, roared in pain and anger, then dropped to all fours. I worked the bolt, ejected the spent casing, chambered another round, aimed for the head this time, hands steadier now from adrenaline. The bear looked at me, looked at Shadow's motionless form, made a calculation. It was hurt. The easy prey was fighting back. And there was a wolf involved now. The math didn't work in its favor anymore. It dropped back to all fours, huffed once more with what sounded like disgust, then turned and lumbered off into the whiteout. I kept the rifle raised until I couldn't see it anymore, until the storm swallowed it completely. Then I crawled over to Shadow. The wolf was breathing, but barely. There was blood in the snow, a lot of it, spreading in a dark stain. I could see a deep gash across its ribs where the bear's claws had connected. 4 parallel cuts, deep enough that I could see muscle and possibly bone. Its eyes were open, watching me, but there was pain in them now. Real pain, stupid, I said. That was really stupid. You could have been killed. Shadow's tail twitched. Once. Yeah, so could you. I looked at Kodiak. He looked at me. We were both thinking the same thing. This wolf had just saved our lives, came out of nowhere, attacked a grizzly that outweighed it by 700 pounds, just to give us a chance. We weren't leaving it here to die. I need to get it to the cabin, I said. Cannot treat it here. Kodiak huffed. Obviously. I took off my coat, wrapped Shadow in it as carefully as I could, mindful of the injury. The cold hit me immediately without the coat, but I ignored it. Had to move fast now. The wolf didn't fight, just lay still, trusting me. I picked it up, all 120 pounds of it, and started walking. Kodiak led the way, nose to the ground, moving on instinct and memory and whatever mysterious sense dogs have that humans don't. The storm raged around us. I couldn't see more than 5 feet. My arms burned from the weight. The cold was working its way into my bones now. Dangerous cold, the kind that kills. But I kept walking, 1 foot in front of the other. Follow Kodiak. Trust him. Keep moving. Don't think about the cold. Don't think about the distance. Just move. I don't know how long it took. Could have been an hour. Could have been 3. Time gets weird when you are fighting hypothermia and carrying a wounded wolf through a blizzard. My thoughts were getting fuzzy again. I kept forgetting where I was going. Why I was doing this. The cold was winning. Then, through the snow and wind, I saw it. The dark shape of my cabin, solid and real and the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I kicked the door open, carried Shadow inside, laid it down carefully in front of the wood stove. Kodiak shook off snow, spraying water everywhere, then immediately went to sniff the wolf. Shadow's eyes tracked him but didn't react. Smart. Don't show aggression when you are vulnerable. I got the fire going, feeding it until the cabin started warming fast. Then I grabbed my medical kit, the one I keep for handling my own hunting injuries, and went to work. Cleaned the wound with alcohol, the wolf barely flinching despite the pain. Stitched it up with dental floss, the only thread I had that was strong enough for this. Bandaged it with strips torn from an old shirt. Through all of it, Shadow just watched me with those pale blue eyes, calm and steady and trusting. You are either very brave or very stupid, I told it. I haven't decided which. The tail twitched again. Maybe both. I made myself coffee, gave Kodiak water and food, and sat down on the floor next to Shadow. The wolf was still watching me. Kodiak came over, sniffed at Shadow one more time. Then did something that surprised me. He lay down next to the wolf. Not touching, maintaining a respectful distance, but close. Pack behavior. Acceptance. Rough, Kodiak said, quieter. Now, Shadow made a soft sound back, not quite a growl, more like a response. Communication. I looked at them, my dog, and like this was completely normal, like we had been doing this for years instead of days. So now what? Shadow closed its eyes. And outside, the storm howled like it was mad we had escaped. Shadow stayed for 5 days recovering. I had expected it to leave as soon as it could walk. But it didn't. Wild animals don't stick around humans longer than necessary. It is instinct. We are dangerous, unpredictable, generally bad news. But Shadow stayed, ate the food I gave it, venison mostly, some dried fish from last summer. Let me change the bandages twice a day. Tolerated Kodiak's presence with what I can only describe as amused patience. On the second day, Kodiak tried to assert dominance by stealing Shadow's food. Classic husky move. He walked over while Shadow was eating casual as anything, and tried to take a piece of meat right out from under the wolf's nose. Shadow looked at him, made a sound that I swear was a laugh, then gently pushed the food back toward Kodiak with its nose. Like, "Here, little brother. If you are that hungry, take it." Kodiak stared at it, completely thrown. Rough. Shadow tilted its head. "He is saying this is his house," I translated, feeling ridiculous talking to animals like they could understand complex sentences. "His territory. You are the guest. Show some respect." Shadow made that laughing sound again, a soft, chuffing noise, then proceeded to ignore Kodiak entirely and went back to eating its food. Kodiak looked at me, deeply offended. "Rough, rough." Now he is saying you are disrespecting him, and he will not stand for it. Shadow stood up, slow, still favoring the injured side, walked over to Kodiak, who tensed, ready to fight or flee, hadn't decided which yet. Then Shadow lowered its head and gently bumped Kodiak's shoulder with its nose. Not aggressive, almost affectionate. Like saying, "Relax, little brother. We are good. I saved your human. You owe me." Then Shadow walked back to its spot by the fire and lay down. Kodiak sat there for a long moment, processing what had just happened. Then he walked over to me gruff. "It just told you that it saved our asses out there," I said. "Maybe show a little gratitude." "Rough," Kodiak said, smaller this time, quieter. Then he walked over to Shadow, lay down about 3 feet away, and that was that. Territory dispute settled. Pack hierarchy established. On the third day, Shadow was moving better, walking around the cabin, testing its weight on the injured side. The stitches were holding. The wound wasn't infected. The wolf was healing fast. Faster than a human would. On the 4th day, it walked outside, checked the perimeter, came back in. On the 5th day, it walked to the door and looked at me. I understood. Time to go. Time to return to the pack. I opened the door. Cold air rushed in, -20 outside. The world white and frozen and indifferent. Shadow stepped outside, tested its weight, moved. Okay, not perfect, but functional. The wolf looked back at me one last time. Those pale blue eyes held mine for a long moment. "You take care of yourself out there," I said. Shadow's tail wagged once. "You too." Then it turned and walked into the trees, moving slow but steady, and disappeared into the white landscape, like it had never been there. I stood in the doorway, cold air burning my lungs, Kodiak next to me. "That is probably the last we will see of it," I said. Kodiak huffed. His tone suggested he didn't believe that for a second. He was right. Shadow came back 2 weeks later, and this time it brought the pack. I was working on my truck, trying to coax the ancient engine into turning over before the next storm hit, when Kodiak started barking. Not his warning bark. His "something interesting is happening" bark. I looked up to see 12 wolves arranged in a semicircle at the edge of the clearing, all sitting calmly in the snow like they had been invited to a meeting. Shadow was in front, watching me. "The hell is this?" I said. Shadow stood, walked forward about 10 feet, stopped. The pack followed, moved with it in perfect synchronization, then sat down again, waiting. All of them just watching me with those eyes that reflected light like coins. I realized what this was. Payment. Wolves understand debts. I had fed them when they were starving. I had saved their alpha's life. Now they were offering something in return. Alliance, protection, partnership, the kind of arrangement that wolves make with each other, extended to a human stupid enough or crazy enough to earn it. I looked at Shadow. "You serious about this?" The wolf's tail wagged once. "Absolutely. Kodiak's not going to like having 12 wolves around. From behind me, still working under the truck's hood. Rough, 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 rough. Translation: hell no. No way. Not happening. This is my human. See, Shadow made that laughing sound, then turned and walked back to the edge of the clearing. The pack stood, followed, and melted into the trees like ghosts. But I knew they would be close. Watching, waiting. Part of our lives now, whether Kodiak liked it or not. I went back to work on the truck. Got the engine running after 30 minutes of swearing and percussive maintenance. Stood there in the cold, hands covered in grease, and thought about what had just happened. My father used to say that animals were better than people because they didn't lie. They didn't cheat. They didn't pretend to be something they weren't. They just were. A wolf was a wolf. A dog was a dog. And you always knew where you stood. I used to think he was wrong. Young and stupid and still believing in things like trust and connection. Then I got older. Watched my mother destroy him. Watched people lie and cheat and betray each other for reasons that made no sense. Realized he had been right all along. Animals were better than people, especially better than women. At least with animals, you knew the rules. Kodiak came over, sat next to me, looked at me with those blue eyes that somehow managed to be both judgmental and supportive at the same time. "Don't say it," I told him rough. I said don't. He huffed. But we both knew what he was thinking, that I had just accepted 12 wolves into our lives, that things were changing, that maybe being alone wasn't working, as well as I had convinced myself it was. I ignored him and went inside to make coffee. But I thought about it. More than I wanted to. The radio started screaming on a Thursday in February. I don't usually listen to it much. News from the outside world doesn't matter when you are this far into the mountains. Politics, sports, whatever crisis people in cities are worried about this week. All of it feels like noise from another planet. But I keep a battery-powered emergency radio for weather reports and official broadcasts. And on that Thursday morning, it wouldn't stop making noise. I was drinking coffee, watching the sunrise paint the peaks orange and pink, when the emergency broadcast system kicked in. That harsh mechanical tone that makes your teeth hurt. Then a voice, trying to stay calm, but not quite succeeding. "This is an emergency message from the United States Geological Survey and the Centers for Disease Control. A significant seismic and thermal event in the Arctic region has released previously contained biological material. All citizens are advised to avoid contact with wildlife, boil all water sources, and remain in their homes until further notice." This is not a drill. Repeat. This is not a drill. The message repeated. I stood there, coffee getting cold in my hand, listening to words that didn't quite make sense but felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. Kodiak whined. He could feel it too. That sense of the world shifting. Something changing that couldn't be changed back. I switched frequencies, tried to find actual news instead of automated messages. Most stations were playing the same emergency broadcast. A few had live reports, panicked journalists, talking over each other about melting permafrost in Siberia and northern Alaska. About ancient viruses that had been frozen for thousands of years suddenly released into the atmosphere and water systems. About animals behaving strangely, attacking people, moving in patterns that didn't fit their nature. One reporter, his voice shaking badly, said, "We are receiving reports of mutations, real-time mutations in wildlife, animals changing, growing, becoming more aggressive." I don't know how else to describe what we are seeing. This isn't natural. This is something we have never static. The station went dead. I tried other frequencies. Some were still broadcasting, most weren't. The ones that were all said versions of the same thing. Stay inside. Don't touch wildlife. Don't drink untreated water. The government is working on a solution. Help is coming. The last part made me laugh. A short, bitter sound. The government doesn't know these mountains. The government doesn't know anything about surviving when the systems break down and you are alone with nothing but your skills and whatever you can carry. I turned off the radio, looked out the window at the valley below. White and pristine and suddenly very threatening. Kodiak pressed against my leg. We need to prepare, I said. Everything we can. I spent the next 6 hours in full survival mode. Filled every container I had with water from the creek, boiled it all, treated it with purification tablets for good measure. Took inventory of food: 40 pounds of dried venison, 25 pounds of smoked fish, rice, beans, flour, salt, coffee. Enough for maybe 2 months if I rationed carefully. Checked ammunition. 300 rounds for the Remington, 200 for the .45. I kept for close work. 100 for the shotgun I rarely used. Sharpened every knife in the cabin. Tested the generator. Made sure the shortwave radio was working. I had been preparing for some version of this my whole life. Not specifically ancient viruses from melting permafrost, but some kind of collapse. Some moment when civilization remembered it was just a thin veneer over chaos. My father taught me that. Be ready. Be self-sufficient. Trust yourself and the wild. Never trust the government. Never trust people, especially women. The sun was setting when I heard the howl. Not Kodiak. Wolves. Multiple voices, close, urgent, warning calls. I grabbed the Remington and stepped outside. The temperature had dropped again, probably -25, and the sky was that deep purple-black you get just after sunset in winter. The howls were coming from the South Valley, maybe half a mile away. Shadows pack. They were warning me about something. Then I saw it. A deer broke from the tree line, running full speed across the clearing, but not running away from something. Running in a frenzy, jerking and spasming like something was wrong with its nervous system. Foam at its mouth, visible even from 100 yards away. Its eyes were red, not bloodshot. Red. Glowing red like there was fire burning inside its skull. It crashed into a tree, hard enough that I heard the impact from where I stood. Scrambled up, wheeled around, and charged at nothing, at air, at shadows. Its movements were wrong, uncoordinated, like its body was fighting itself. Kodiak growled, low and continuous, hackles fully raised. Every instinct telling him this was wrong. The deer's antlers, I realized, were different. Wrong. They had grown. Not normal seasonal growth, but new growth. Fresh, sharp, branching in ways that didn't follow natural patterns. They looked less like antlers and more like weapons, like something designed specifically to kill. The deer turned toward my cabin, saw us, and charged. I shot it. Clean shot. Center mass, should have dropped it immediately. The deer stumbled but kept coming. I worked the bolt, shot it again. Still coming, foam flying from its mouth. Those red eyes locked on us with an intensity that wasn't natural. Third shot. This time, I aimed for the head, the only thing that seemed to matter. The round blew through skull and brain. And finally, the deer collapsed 15 yards from my porch. I stood there, rifle raised, breathing hard. Kodiak was pressed against my leg, whining. The deer twitched once, twice, then went still. Steam rose from its body into the cold air. I walked over to it slowly, kept the rifle ready in case it moved again. Up close, it was worse, much worse. The red eyes were clouded over now, but I could see black veins running through the whites, thick pulsing veins that looked more like roots than blood vessels. The antlers weren't just overgrown. They were fused, twisted, growing in geometric patterns that made my brain hurt to look at. The foam around its mouth had a yellowish tint that didn't look like anything natural. It smelled wrong too, sweet and rotten at the same time. Jesus Christ, I said. From the trees, a howl. Shadow's voice, unmistakable. Then the pack emerged, all 12 of them, moving fast, forming a defensive perimeter around my cabin. Shadow came directly to me, looked at the dead deer, then at me. Those pale blue eyes were different now. Afraid. Actually afraid. Yeah, I said. I know. It is starting. Shadow growled, looked south toward the valley, and I understood. More coming. Whatever this virus was, whatever had been released from that melting permafrost, it was spreading fast. This was the beginning. I looked at Kodiak. Get inside. Now he didn't argue. Smart dog. I followed him in, barred the door, loaded every weapon I had. Through the window, I could see Shadow and the pack taking positions around the cabin, facing outward, ready for whatever came next. The sun finished setting, the valley went dark, and from the south, from deep in the mountains, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Not howls, screams. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The sound of animals in pain and rage, and something worse than both, the sound of nature forgetting its own rules. Breaking apart, turning into something new and terrible. I stood in my cabin, weapons ready, and realized that the world I had known for 50 years had just ended. The real question was whether I was going to end with it. They came in waves over the next 3 weeks, not immediately. The first night was quiet, tense, waiting. Shadow and the pack maintained their perimeter. I kept watch through the windows. Rifle ready. Kodiak paced, nervous energy with nowhere to go. But nothing attacked. The second night, we heard them. Sounds in the darkness. Movement in the trees. Things that sounded like animals but moved wrong. Made noises that didn't fit any species I knew. Shadow and the pack responded with howls, warnings, claiming territory. Whatever was out there tested the edges but didn't engage. The third night, they attacked. It started just after midnight. Animals that should have been miles apart. Animals that should have been avoiding each other. All moving together. Deer, elk, mountain lions, even a black bear. All with those glowing red eyes. All moving in coordinated patterns like they were being controlled by a single mind. Shadow and the pack met them at the clearing's edge. What happened next was brutal. The wolves worked together with pack tactics that had been refined over thousands of years of evolution. Going for legs and throats, bringing down animals twice their size through coordination and speed. But the mutated animals didn't go down easy. They fought past pain, past injury that should have killed them, until their bodies literally stopped working. I couldn't just watch. I moved to the window, opened it slightly, and started shooting. Picked my targets carefully. Only the ones that broke through the wolf line, the ones heading for the cabin. The Remington kicked against my shoulder, brass casings clinking on the floor. Kodiak barked with each shot, his version of encouragement or celebration, hard to tell which. The fight lasted maybe 20 minutes, felt like hours. When it was over, there were bodies everywhere. 12 mutated animals down. 2 of Shadow's pack didn't get up. I grabbed my medical kit and went outside. The cold hit immediately, shocking, even though I knew it was coming, but I ignored it. Shadow was limping, bleeding from a gash on its foreleg. I caught its shoulder before it could move away. "Don't be stupid," I said. "Let me look." The wound was deep, down to muscle. I cleaned it, stitched it, wrapped it. Shadow watched me the whole time, didn't make a sound. When I finished, it licked my hand once. "Thank you." Then Shadow turned to check on the pack. I moved to the 2 wolves that hadn't gotten up. Both were dead. A smaller gray female and a young male, maybe 2 years old. Shadow stood over them for a moment, made a sound I had never heard before. Low and mournful grief. Real grief. "I am sorry," I said. Shadow looked at me, then at the bodies, then at the forest. More would come. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. We buried them in the snow, me and a pack of wolves digging graves in the middle of the night while the bodies of mutated animals cooled around us. If someone had told me 6 months ago this would be my life, I would have said they were insane. I wasn't laughing now. When we finished, Shadow sat down next to me. We looked at the valley together, dark and silent again, waiting for the next wave. Kodiak came outside, assessed the situation with his usual dramatic flair, and planted himself between me and Shadow. "Rough," he said, firm and clear. Shadow looked at him, huffed softly. "He says we are a pack now," I translated. "All of us. Whether we like it or not." Kodiak's tail wagged slightly. He looked at me, then at Shadow, then back at me. Gruff. Shadow made a soft sound. Agreement. Yeah, I said, looking at both of them, all of us, and sitting there in the freezing darkness surrounded by death and blood, and the wreckage of everything I had known. With a husky and a wolf pack, I realized something that would have horrified my younger self. I wasn't alone anymore, and that wasn't as terrifying as I had always thought it would be. The mutations accelerated over the next month. Every day brought something new and horrible. Every night brought more attacks. The animals were getting smarter, more coordinated, more dangerous. The radio, when it worked through the magnetic interference from solar storms that were apparently happening now too, brought nightmare stories. Cities collapsing, infrastructure failing, entire regions going dark. The government's solutions weren't working, and the mutations themselves were evolving faster than anyone had predicted. Grizzlies growing to 12 feet, with claws like curved knives and strength that could tear through trees. Mountain lions developing true pack behavior, hunting in coordinated groups of 20 or more. Elk with antlers that branched into impossible geometric patterns, sharp as spears and harder than bone should be. Birds. Flocks of them, thousands, diving at anything that moved in coordinated attacks, that seemed almost intelligent. But I was learning too. Learning their patterns, their weaknesses, how to predict attacks, where they would come from, how to kill them efficiently with minimum ammunition expenditure. Shadow and the pack were essential. The wolves had senses I didn't, could smell and hear things long before I could see them. We developed a system. Shadow's pack would alert. I would position. We'd fight together. Man, dog, wolves, pack. On day 43 after the broadcast started, I found the ptarmigans. I was checking my northern trapline when I saw them. Ptarmigans, those chunky little white birds that are usually harmless and kind of cute in a round, fluffy way. There were about 30 of them, all dead, arranged in a perfect circle in the snow. Not killed by predators, arranged, deliberately positioned, heads facing inward toward the center of the circle, wings spread in a geometric pattern that looked almost ceremonial. I stared at it for a long time. Animals don't do this. They don't make patterns. They don't think symbolically. They just survive, reproduce, die. That is it. Unless something was changing that fundamental nature. I looked closer, kneeling in the snow. The bird's eyes were open, clouded with those black-veined patterns I had seen in other mutations. Their beaks had grown longer, sharper, more like weapons than tools for eating seeds and insects. Their talons extended beyond normal, curved, and wicked-looking. I heard Shadow growl behind me. Turned to see the wolf with 3 pack members, all staring at the circle of birds, hackles raised, making low, continuous sounds. They sensed something wrong. Something worse than just mutation. Something that made even predators nervous. Yeah, I said. I don't like it either. Shadow barked once, sharp warning. Then I heard what the wolf had heard. Wings. Overhead. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. I looked up. The sky was dark with birds. Not just ptarmigans. Everything. Ravens, crows, hawks, eagles. All of them flying in perfect formation. Geometric patterns that seemed to shift and pulse, moving like they were one organism instead of hundreds of individuals. They circled once, twice. Then dove, run, I yelled. We ran for the rocks. An overhang I knew about 100 yards away. Shadow and the pack moved with me, forming a living shield, snapping at birds that got too close. Kodiak, who had been ranging ahead, came barreling back, barking his head off. The birds hit like a storm. Hundreds of them, diving, slashing with talons and beaks that had grown into weapons. They went for eyes, throats, anything exposed. I covered my head with my arms, kept moving, felt claws tear through my jacket and into flesh. Pain sharp and immediate. But I kept moving. Shadow leaped into the air, caught a raven mid-flight, crushed it in powerful jaws. The other wolves did the same, creating a moving perimeter of snapping teeth. Kodiak jumped up, snatched a crow out of the air, shook it until its neck snapped. We made it to the rocks. I scrambled underneath the overhang. The pack pressed in around me, creating layers of protection. Birds slammed against stone, shrieking sounds that didn't sound like birds anymore, more like machinery grinding. One made it through the defensive line, went for my face. Shadow caught it mid-flight, tore it apart. The attack lasted 5 minutes that felt like 50. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The birds wheeled up into formation and flew south, toward lower elevations, toward towns, toward people who weren't prepared. I lay under the rocks, breathing hard, covered in scratches and blood. Most of it was mine. Some of it wasn't. The pack was in similar shape, panting, wounded but alive. Kodiak had a gash across his shoulder. Shadow's ear was torn. "Everybody okay?" I asked, which was stupid because nobody could answer. Shadow looked at me, huffed. "We are alive. Stop asking stupid questions. Move." I crawled out from under the rocks, assessed the damage. My arms were cut up, face bleeding, scalp torn in several places. Nothing deep, but enough that I needed to clean them soon to avoid infection, which raised a terrifying question. If the infection was in the bird's blood and their talons had broken my skin, mixing their blood with mine, was I infected? I looked at my hands, checked my arms, looking for any sign of the black veins that marked the turned animals. Nothing. Just cuts and scratches. Normal bleeding. Normal human blood. Red, not black. But I had need to watch carefully. The mutation seemed to take about 12 hours to manifest in animals. Would it be the same in humans? Faster? Slower? "We need to get back," I said. "Now. I need to clean these wounds and monitor for symptoms." The walk back was tense. Every shadow, every sound made us freeze, ready for another attack. But nothing came. The forest had gone quiet. Unnaturally quiet. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, no wind through the branches. Just silence, thick and heavy like a physical presence. When we reached the cabin, I did something I hadn't done since I was a kid worried about monsters under the bed. I went to the small mirror hanging next to the sink and checked myself. Really checked. Face, neck, arms, looking for any sign of the black veins spreading through my system. Nothing. Just cuts and scratches, normal wounds. I cleaned them thoroughly, used the last of my antibiotics, bandaged everything. Then I sat down with my back against the wall and started counting. 12 hours. If I was infected, I would know by then. The hours crawled by like wounded animals. Shadow and Kodiak stayed close, watching me, waiting to see if I had changed. If they would have to kill me. I thought about that. Thought about what I would want them to do if I turned into one of those red-eyed monsters. Would I want Shadow to end it quickly? Would I want Kodiak to remember me as I was, not as some mutated thing? 6 hours. Still nothing. No fever. No aggression. No red eyes. 8 hours. Starting to feel hopeful. 12 hours. I was still me. Still human. Still uninfected. Shadow's tail wagged. Relief. "Yeah," I said. "I am okay. We are okay for now." But I thought about those birds flying south in perfect formation toward towns full of people, toward populations that didn't have wolves protecting them, who didn't understand what was coming, who probably thought the government would save them. And I realized something that changed everything. I couldn't stay isolated forever, couldn't just protect my cabin and my pack. People were going to come, refugees, running from towns that were collapsing, running from mutations they couldn't fight, and they had need help. The question was whether I was willing to give it, whether I could overcome 38 years of deliberate isolation and distrust, whether I could let people into my territory. I looked at Shadow. The wolf was watching me, those pale blue eyes calm and patient. "What do you think?" I asked. "Should we help them when they come?" Shadow's tail twitched, a small movement. But I had learned to read it. The wolf was saying, "Your decision. Your territory. But remember, pack survives by working together." "You are right," I said. "Damn you, you are right." Kodiak huffed. Finally catching on, his expression said, and just like that, the decision was made. But before any refugees arrived, Before I had to face my fear of trusting people again, something happened that almost ended everything. It was 3 days after the bird attack. I was scouting the western ridge with Shadow and Kodiak, checking for new routes in case we needed to evacuate quickly. The temperature had been fluctuating wildly over the past week. Warm days followed by freezing nights, and the snowpack was unstable. Dangerous conditions, the kind that killed experienced mountaineers every year. I should have turned back, but I needed to know the terrain, needed to understand our options. So we kept going. We were crossing a steep slope, maybe 40 degrees, when I heard it, a sound like distant thunder, but wrong. Too sustained, too close, too final. "Run," I yelled, already knowing it was pointless. The avalanche hit before we made it 10 steps. Not the whole slope, thank God, but a section maybe 50 feet wide. More than enough. Snow moving like water, fast and heavy and inevitable. It swept us off our feet, carried us down the mountain. I tried to swim, tried to stay on top of the flow like you are supposed to in avalanche training. But it was too powerful, too chaotic. The world became white chaos and tumbling, and no sense of up or down. Then it stopped. The snow settled, compressed, became solid as concrete in seconds. I was buried, not deep. I could move my arms slightly, could feel a small air pocket near my face, but I was stuck, trapped. The weight of the snow pressing down from all sides, immobilizing me completely. This was how people died in avalanches. Not from impact, not from falling, from suffocation, from being buried alive with just enough air to know you are dying. I heard barking, Kodiak. Muffled, distant, but there. He had stayed on top somehow, or dug himself out. Good dog. Then I heard digging, frantic, desperate digging. Kodiak was trying to reach me, claws tearing at compacted snow. But one dog, even a 100-pound husky with determination, couldn't dig through that much snow fast enough. I had maybe 10 minutes of air in this pocket, maybe less. My chest was tight. Breathing was getting harder. The panic was starting to set in, which made me breathe faster, which used up oxygen faster. Classic death spiral that killed people even when they survived the initial burial. Then I heard howling. Shadow, the digging intensified. Multiple sets of paws now, tearing at the snow. Shadow had called the pack. They were all digging, working together, coordinated effort. My air pocket was getting smaller. Each breath was harder. My chest felt like it had a weight on it. I was starting to see spots in my vision. Or maybe that was just the darkness of being buried. Hard to tell. Then I saw light. A hole appeared above my face, widened. Kodiak's nose appeared. Then his whole head, tongue hanging out, eyes wild with fear and determination. Rough, rough, rough. Translation: "You are alive. Don't you dare die on me." Behind him, Shadow. The wolf grabbed my jacket collar in its jaws, pulled with incredible strength. Other wolves dug around my arms, my legs clearing snow. Kodiak dug at my chest, throwing snow everywhere like a machine. It took 5 minutes to extract me. 5 minutes of coordinated effort, wolves and dog working as one perfect unit. When I finally crawled out of the snow, gasping and shaking, I lay on my back and just breathed. Cold air had never tasted so good. Shadow collapsed next to me, panting hard. The wolf had been digging with such intensity that its paws were bleeding, claws torn from tearing through compacted snow. The other pack members were in similar shape, exhausted and injured from their rescue efforts. "You saved me," I said when I could finally speak. Again, Shadow's tail twitched. "Obviously. What did you think would happen?" Then I heard something that made my blood freeze all over again. A deep, ominous rumbling sound. Not thunder. Not engines. Snow. More snow shifting. Above us, the slope wasn't done. It wasn't stable. "We need to move," I said, trying to get up. Now, another wave is coming. Too late. I saw it happen in slow motion, the entire upper slope letting go, triggered by the vibrations from our digging, from our movement. Thousands of tons of snow and ice and debris. A wall of white death. We tried to run. There was nowhere to go. The avalanche was too wide, moving too fast. A force of nature that didn't care about our will to survive. It hit like the end of the world. I went under immediately. This time, there was no air pocket. Just crushing pressure and cold and complete darkness. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't even think clearly. This was it. This was really it. This was how I died. Buried alive in the mountains I had called home for 38 years. My lungs burned. I needed to breathe. My body was screaming for air. I was starting to black out. Then something grabbed me. Strong jaws on my jacket, pulling with impossible strength. Shadow. The wolf was somehow moving through the avalanche, using its powerful legs to swim through the flow like it was water instead of snow, dragging me with it. We broke the surface. I gasped. Inhaled snow and air, and probably half the mountain coughed violently. Shadow kept pulling, kept fighting, getting us toward the edge of the flow where the snow was thinner, slower, less deadly. Kodiak appeared from somewhere, grabbed my other arm in his jaws. Both of them pulling now, working together, refusing to let the mountain take me. We made it to solid ground, barely. Collapsed in a heap. All three of us tangled together, breathing hard, hearts pounding, alive against all odds and logic. I lay there for a long moment, just processing the fact that I wasn't dead. Then I noticed Shadow wasn't moving right. The wolf tried to stand. Collapsed. Tried again, couldn't. Something was very wrong. I looked closer, and my stomach dropped. Shadow's back leg was twisted at an angle that legs don't twist. Broken. Badly broken, compound fracture visible through the fur. And there was blood. A lot of blood. The wolf had a massive gash across its side, deep enough to see ribs. Something during the avalanche, ice, rock, debris, had torn it open. No, I said. No, 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 Shadow. Don't you dare. The wolf looked at me with those pale blue eyes. Calm. Accepting. This was bad. We both knew it. I ripped off my jacket, pressed it against the wound. Blood soaked through immediately. Too much blood. The broken leg was bad, potentially crippling. But the wound was worse. Out here, miles from the cabin, with no medical supplies beyond basic first aid. This was a death sentence. Shadow knew it. I knew it. Kodiak whined, pressed against Shadow. The pack gathered around, making soft sounds, mourning sounds. Already grieving. No, I said again, more forcefully. We are not doing this, Shadow. You hear me? We are not fucking doing this. I looked around frantically, trying to think through the panic. We needed to stop the bleeding, needed to stabilize the leg, needed to get Shadow back to the cabin where I had real medical supplies. All impossible, all necessary. I used my belt as a tourniquet above the wound, tied it as tight as I dared, ripped my shirt into strips, packed the wound as best I could with shaking hands. Shadow didn't make a sound, didn't move. Just watched me with those eyes that trusted me to fix this, even though we both knew it might be unfixable. The leg was harder. No splint materials here, nothing straight enough, strong enough. I finally used 2 tent stakes from my pack and more shirt strips, improvised a splint that probably wouldn't hold but was better than nothing. Had to immobilize it somehow. Kodiak, I said, voice shaking. Get the pack. We need a travois. We need to drag Shadow back to the cabin. Kodiak looked at me. At Shadow, at the 5 miles of brutal terrain between us and safety. His expression said very clearly, "Are you completely insane?" "Yes," I said. "Completely insane. Now, help me, goddammit." We built a travois from branches torn from nearby trees and rope from my pack, laid Shadow on it as gently as possible. The wolf weighed 120 pounds. The travois weighed another 20. And we had 5 miles to go, through snow and cold and terrain that was actively trying to kill us. I grabbed the front of the travois, ropes digging into my shoulders. Kodiak grabbed the harness I had rigged, strong husky muscles built for exactly this kind of work. The pack positioned themselves around us, ready to help if we faltered, ready to defend if anything attacked. And we started pulling. It took 8 hours. 8 hours of pure agony, of muscles burning, and then going numb, of hands freezing to the rope despite gloves, of shadow bleeding slowly, despite the tourniquet, of wondering if this was all pointless, if the wolf would die anyway and I was just torturing myself and prolonging the inevitable. But we kept pulling, one foot in front of the other. Don't think about the pain. Don't think about the distance. Don't think about the odds. Just pull. The pack took turns running ahead to scout, coming back to guide us around obstacles. They dug out sections where the snow was too deep. They provided encouragement in the only way wolves could, with their presence, their loyalty, their refusal to abandon their alpha. When we finally saw the cabin as the sun was setting, I have never been more relieved and exhausted in my entire life. I couldn't feel my hands anymore. My shoulders felt like they had been torn apart, but we had made it. I kicked the door open, pulled the travois inside, laid Shadow carefully in front of the wood stove. The wolf's eyes were closed now. Breathing was shallow. Not good. I went to work immediately. Got the fire roaring, warming the cabin. Cleaned the wound properly with what was left of my medical supplies. Stitched it with actual medical thread this time. Better than dental floss. Set the broken leg as best I could with a proper splint using metal rods from my toolbox. Gave Shadow water, food, antibiotics I had been saving for emergencies. This qualified as an emergency. The wolf's eyes opened briefly. Looked at me. Too tired to even wag its tail. But there was something in that look. Trust. Gratitude. Pack. I worked through the night, checking vitals every hour, changing bandages, making sure Shadow stayed warm. Kodiak refused to leave, lay next to the wolf, sharing body heat, providing comfort in the only way he knew how. At dawn, Shadow's fever broke. The wolf's eyes opened, clearer now, more focused. Looked at me. Tail wagged. Once, weak, but there. You are going to make it, I said, voice hoarse from exhaustion and emotion. You stubborn, crazy, magnificent animal, you are going to make it. Shadow huffed. Obviously. Did you think I had leave you alone? That was the day I stopped thinking of Shadow as just an ally or even a friend. That was the day I understood what pack really meant. Not just fighting together. Not just hunting together. Saving each other. Refusing to let go even when every logical calculation, every survival instinct says to quit and save yourself. Shadow recovered over the next 3 weeks. Slowly, painfully, but steadily. The leg healed crooked, would always have a slight limp, a permanent reminder. The wound closed. Left a scar across the wolf's ribs that would never fully fade. But Shadow got stronger, day by day, hour by hour. And our bond became something more than friendship, more than alliance. It became pack in the truest, deepest sense. The kind of bond that said, I will pull your broken body through 5 miles of snow. I will dig you out of an avalanche with bleeding paws. I will swim through chaos to drag you to safety. I will not let you die. The first refugee showed up on a Monday, 8 weeks after the initial broadcasts, 3 weeks after Shadow's recovery. I was on the roof, patching the section where snow weight had stressed the tin, when Kodiak started his people are coming bark. Not his warning bark. Just his something's different. And I have opinions about it bark. I climbed down, grabbed the Remington out of pure habit, and walked to the edge of the clearing. One man, alone. Mid-40s, lean like he had lost weight recently, moving slow like every step hurt. He was carrying a pack that looked too light for someone traveling through winter mountains, wearing clothes that weren't warm enough. His face was red from windburn, lips cracked and bleeding, eyes hollow like he had seen things he couldn't unsee. He stopped when he saw me, raised his hands immediately, universal gesture of peace. I am not here for trouble. I need help, please. Just for one night. I looked at him. looked at Shadow, who had appeared at the tree line with what remained of the pack. 10 wolves now, after losses to mutations in the Avalanche. The wolf's body language wasn't aggressive, just watchful. Assessing. Every instinct I had spent 38 years cultivating was screaming at me to say no. To turn him away. People meant complications. People meant needs and wants and eventual betrayal. People meant pain, especially if they brought others. Especially if there were women among them. But he was alone. A man alone. And he was dying. Another night outside in these temperatures, in his condition, and he wouldn't make it to morning. "How far would you come from?" I asked, keeping the rifle ready but not actively pointing it at him. "Silverton. Town went to hell 6 days ago. Animals attacked first, coordinated attacks like nothing I have ever seen. Then people started turning. Fever, then aggression, then they just lost themselves. Started attacking anyone nearby. I have been walking since." Silverton was 40 miles south. Down the mountain, across 2 valleys, through terrain that would kill an experienced hiker in good conditions. In winter, with mutations hunting everything that moved. This man walking 40 miles meant he was either very skilled or very lucky. Probably both. Any of you bitten? Scratched? Any contact with infected animals? No, sir. I was careful. Avoided everything I could. Ran from what I couldn't avoid. Fever? Aggression? Any symptoms at all? No, sir. Nothing. I looked at him for a long moment, really studied him, looking for signs of infection, for the black veins, for the red eyes, for anything that suggested he was lying or infected or dangerous. Nothing. Just a man at the end of his rope, barely holding it together. "Kodiak, Shadow, stand down," I said. Kodiak sat immediately, though he kept his eyes on the stranger, making it very clear where his loyalties were. Shadow made a sound, and the pack melted back into the trees. Not gone. Just watching from a distance. "You can stay tonight," I told the man. "One night. Follow my rules or you are out in the cold, understood?" "Yes, sir. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Come on." His name was David. No last name offered, and I didn't ask. Didn't want to know more than necessary. He had been a carpenter in Silverton before everything fell apart. Had some survival skills. Knew how to hunt. I fed him, gave him coffee, let him warm up by the fire. Kodiak spent the entire time sitting between me and him, 60 pounds of husky, making it clear who was in charge here. "What happened in Silverton?" I asked. Needed to know what we were dealing with. What was coming. David looked at his coffee for a moment. Steam rising in the warm cabin air. "Started with animals 3 weeks ago. Deer attacked people in broad daylight, something they had never done before. Bears that should have been sleeping were hunting actively. Then birds, thousands of them, coordinated attacks like they were all thinking with one mind. People started dying. Then some people started changing. Fever first, then aggression. Then they just stopped being people. Attacked anyone nearby, even family. How long from symptoms to full turning? Maybe 12 hours, maybe less. Hard to say exactly. By the time we realized what was happening, half the town was already gone. Same timeline I had calculated from my own observations. I thought about infection vectors, about how fast this thing was spreading through populations, exponential growth. The mathematical model for apocalypse. Are there others? I asked. Others who escaped Silverton? A group of 15 left when I did. We stayed together for 2 days, then got hit by a pack of those mutated mountain lions. We got separated during the attack. I don't know if any of them made it. Hope so. Good people. If they do make it this far, they will probably head in this direction. Higher elevation, away from population centers, away from where the mutations seem to be concentrated. David nodded slowly. That was the plan. Head north into the high country, find safe ground. Wait it out. Hope that whatever's happening burns itself out or the government gets it under control. I laughed. Couldn't help it. Short, bitter sound. The government isn't getting anything under control. The government is probably gone by now. We are on our own. Yeah, David said quietly. I know. We sat in silence for a while. Then I asked the question I needed to ask. You know how to build. Actually build, not just hammer nails. Yes, sir. I am a carpenter. Built houses for 20 years. Furniture too. Pretty much anything out of wood. Good, because if more people come, and they will come, we are going to need to expand. Need more shelter, more storage, more everything. Cannot all fit in here. David looked around the small cabin, really seeing it for the first time. One room, 400 square feet. Not even close to enough space for multiple people long term. You are going to let them stay? He asked. The others, if they come. I thought about that. About 38 years of isolation. About my father's lessons. About trusting no one. About how people, especially women, destroyed everything good. Then I looked at Shadow, visible through the window, keeping watch over the clearing. Looked at Kodiak, who had risked everything to dig me out of snow. Thought about Pack. Yeah, I said. Just men and boys, though, no women. That is non-negotiable. But men who can work, who can fight, who can follow orders. Yeah, they can stay. David nodded. Didn't question the rule about women. Maybe he had had his own bad experiences. Maybe he just understood that in the apocalypse, you don't argue with the man who controls the only safe shelter for miles. I can help build, he said. Happy to earn my keep. Good. You rest tonight. Tomorrow we start planning. More people came. Over the next 4 weeks, they trickled in like water finding cracks. Never more than 3 or 4 at a time. All men or boys, which worked perfectly for me. I didn't ask about families, about wives or daughters left behind. Didn't want to know. Just wanted to know if they could work, if they could fight, if they could follow orders without constant arguing. They came with stories of horror, of towns that had collapsed overnight, of mutations spreading faster than anyone had predicted, of people turning on each other when the food ran out and the power died, of society breaking down so completely and so quickly that it seemed impossible except it was happening. 22 people total ended up at my cabin over that month. 22 refugees from lives that had ended, from worlds that had burned. And I made a decision that would have horrified my younger self, would have made my father roll in his grave. I would help them. I would build something with them. Not out of altruism, not out of some naive belief in human goodness. Out of practical calculation, these mountains were my territory. If people were going to die here anyway, they might as well die useful. And if enough of them survived, if we could build something that actually worked, maybe we could hold off the mutations, maybe we could survive. Plus, and this was harder to admit, Shadow seemed to approve. The wolf watched each newcomer carefully with those pale blue eyes that saw too much. Assessed them with some criteria I didn't fully understand, and never once showed aggression toward the ones I let stay. If Shadow trusted them, that was good enough for me. We got to work. I designated David as my second in command, put him in charge of construction. We couldn't all fit in the cabin, obviously, so we started building. Lean toss at first. Rough shelters attached to the cabin sides using salvaged materials and deadfall from the forest. Then actual structures, proper buildings with walls and roofs. David and the other men with carpentry skills worked constantly, dawn to dusk. Using wood we harvested carefully, taking only what we needed, never clear-cutting. Building with skill and efficiency that impressed me despite my general distrust of people. I designated other men for specific tasks based on their skills. Hunters, gatherers, guards. Established a hierarchy based on ability, not democracy or politics or feelings. If you could hunt, you hunted. If you could build, you built. If you could fight, you guarded. Simple, clear, effective. Shadow, and what remained of the pack. 10 wolves now. A smaller force, but still formidable, became our early warning system. The wolves ranged in a 3-mile radius around the growing settlement, patrolling constantly, howling when they detected mutations or threats. It gave us time to prepare, time to position, Time to survive. We also built defenses, and this was my domain. I knew traps, knew ambush points, knew how to turn terrain into an advantage. We dug trenches around the expanding perimeter, filled them with sharpened stakes hidden under snow, built elevated firing positions using fallen trees and scavenged materials, cleared fields of fire so nothing could approach unseen, stockpiled ammunition, rationed it carefully. The settlement grew. Within 4 weeks, we had 5 structures around the original cabin, all connected by covered walkways, so we could move between them during storms without freezing. We had a central fire pit for cooking, communal but organized. A storage building for food and supplies, with guards posted, a workshop where David and his crew could build and repair. Even a rough infirmary, basically just a structure with beds and my medical supplies. But it was something. It looked like a settlement, a community. The thing I had spent my entire adult life avoiding. But it worked. Against all my expectations and prejudices, it actually worked. The attacks continued, mutations probing our defenses every few nights. But we held. Shadow and the pack would alert. We would position. We had fight as a coordinated unit, and we had win more often than we lost. Not without casualties, we lost 3 men in the first month to mutations that broke through our defenses during a coordinated assault, but we held more ground than we gave up. And slowly, against all odds and my cynical expectations, we started to feel like something more than just survivors hiding from the apocalypse. We started to feel like a pack. The boy showed up on a Wednesday, 9 weeks after the broadcast started, 5 weeks after the settlement began forming. He was maybe 10 years old, alone, half frozen, stumbling through the snow toward our settlement, like a ghost. Shadow found him first, brought him in gently without force or threat. The wolf's massive jaws carrying the kid's jacket collar without biting down, just guiding him toward safety. The boy's name was Tyler. He had been separated from his father during a mutation attack 3 days ago, had been walking alone through the wilderness ever since, had no idea if his father was alive or dead. He was hypothermic, dehydrated, traumatized by things no 10-year-old should ever have to see. I would never dealt with kids before. Didn't like them much, if I was honest. They were loud, needy, complicated in ways that made my head hurt. Required emotional availability I had never developed. But standing there looking at this 10-year-old who had somehow survived 3 days alone in a frozen wasteland full of monsters, I felt something shift inside me. "David," I said, "get him inside. Warm him up, feed him, let him sleep. Everything he needs." David nodded and took the kid toward the infirmary. Tyler looked back at me as they walked away, and I saw something in his eyes. Not fear, not gratitude exactly, recognition. Like he saw something in me that he understood, something familiar. Later that night, after Tyler had eaten and warmed up and finally stopped shivering uncontrollably, he came and sat next to me by the central fire. Didn't say anything at first, just sat there, watching the flames dance and crackle, processing whatever he needed to process. Kodiak walked over, read the room somehow, and put his head on the kid's lap without being asked. Tyler started petting him automatically, and I saw some of the tension leave his small shoulders. "What is the dog's name?" Tyler asked. Quiet voice. First words he had spoken since arriving. "Kodiak and the white wolf?" "Shadow." "Shadow saved me. I was lost in the trees and it found me. Led me here. Shadow's good at that, finding people who need help." We sat in silence for a while. The fire popped. Somewhere in the settlement, men were talking quietly. Normal sounds, safe sounds. Then Tyler said, "My dad taught me how to shoot, how to track, how to survive in the wilderness. Good skills to have, especially now. He said, if we ever got separated, I should head north to high ground. Find good people. People who would help." "This isn't good people," I said. "Honestly, this is people trying not to die. There is a difference." Tyler looked at me with those old eyes. Eyes that had seen too much too fast. "That is the same thing now, isn't it?" I looked at him. Smart kid. Way too smart for 10 years old. But that is what the apocalypse does. Burns away childhood faster than fire. Leaves only survivors. Yeah, I said after a moment. I guess it is. Tyler stayed. We gave him a place in one of the structures, gave him tasks appropriate for his age and size. He helped with food prep, with maintaining fires, with small repairs around the settlement. He learned fast, didn't complain about hard work, earned his keep without being asked. And something happened that I didn't expect, that I had never even considered possible. The settlement changed with him there. Having a kid present, having someone who represented a future beyond just surviving today, it made everyone try harder, fight harder, care more about making it to tomorrow. Tyler became the thing we were all protecting, not consciously. Nobody said it out loud, but you could see it in how people acted around him. Making sure he ate first during meals. Making sure he was in the most secure structure during attacks. Making sure he smiled occasionally, had moments of being a kid despite everything. Kodiak adopted him completely. The dog barely left Tyler's side after that first night, slept next to his bed, followed him everywhere during the day, protected him with the same loyalty he showed me. Shadow too, though more subtly. The wolf would check on him regularly, just appear near wherever Tyler was working, and sit nearby for a few minutes. Silent presence, then disappear back to patrol. 10 weeks into the mutations, we had a functioning settlement. 22 men, 1 kid, 1 dog, and a wolf pack. Surviving against odds that should have killed us all multiple times over, and I realized something that would have made my younger self sick with disgust. I cared about these people. Not deeply, not personally in most cases, but I cared whether they lived or died. They were my pack now, my responsibility, my people. My father had isolated himself when the world hurt him, and it killed him. I had spent 38 years following his example, convinced he was right about everything. Maybe it was time to admit he was wrong. Then Victor Cain came and everything changed. I first heard his name on the shortwave radio during one of the rare moments when atmospheric conditions allowed clear transmission. A settlement about 50 miles east had managed to get communication equipment working despite the magnetic interference from the solar storms. They shared information, warnings, intel about what was happening in the wider world. One transmission mentioned a name, Victor Cain, former CDC researcher, last known position working with viral mutations and evolutionary biology. The transmission was broken, full of static, but I caught the important parts. Cain had a facility somewhere in the mountains. He was capturing refugees, experimenting on them, intentionally infecting them to study the mutation process in real time. He had resources, organization, armed personnel. He was dangerous. I filed it away as useful information but didn't think much more about it. We had our own problems to deal with. Mutations attacked every few nights. Food was running low. Winter showed no signs of breaking even though it should have been spring by now. But then survivors started showing up with stories. Refugees who had escaped from Cain's facility, who had seen what he was doing there firsthand. Their stories were consistent, too consistent to be lies or exaggeration. Cain was weaponizing the virus, creating controlled mutations, refining the infection so it could be directed, targeted, used as a weapon. He was building something, an army maybe, a new order, something that required test subjects and raw materials in the form of human beings. And he was expanding his territory, moving north through the mountains toward us. The attack came on a Tuesday night, because of course it did. Tuesdays and I have history. Shadow's alarm howl woke me from restless sleep. Not the usual patrol howl. The serious howl. The everyone get ready right fucking now howl. I grabbed the Remington, threw on clothes, ran outside into -30 cold. The entire settlement was mobilizing around me. David was organizing the men into defensive positions with efficiency that spoke to prior military training he had never mentioned. Tyler was being moved to the most secure interior structure with 2 guards posted. Shadow and the pack were arranged at the southern perimeter, hackles raised, teeth bared. Then I saw them through the darkness and blowing snow. Men, human men, not mutations. Maybe 30 of them. moving in professional formations that spoke to training and discipline. Armed with military-grade weapons that shouldn't have been available to civilians, wearing tactical gear that looked new, expensive, well-maintained. This wasn't some random gang of survivors. This was organized, trained, funded, and leading them was a man in a long black coat that made no practical sense for the conditions, but somehow looked right on him. Late 40s, tall, thin, like he had never done physical labor in his life. He had the kind of face that looked intelligent and completely dead inside at the same time. Eyes that calculated instead of feeling Victor Cain. He stopped about 100 yards out, just beyond accurate rifle range, raised his hands in a gesture of peace that was obviously complete bullshit. "Elias Thorne," he called out. His voice carried across the snow, clear and confident and educated. "I have heard about you, the mountain man who built a community from nothing. The one with the wolves. The one who has been surviving when everyone else is dying." Quite impressive. I didn't answer, just kept my rifle raised, finger on the trigger. "I am not here to fight," Cain continued, like we were having a civilized conversation. "I am here to offer you a choice. A real choice. Not the illusion of choice that most people are facing right now. Join me. Bring your people, your skills, your territory, your knowledge. I am building something bigger than these small, isolated settlements. Something organized. Something with an actual future. Not interested," I called back. "You should be interested. I have resources you cannot even imagine. Medical supplies. Food that isn't dried meat and melted snow. Weapons. Real weapons, not hunting rifles. And most importantly, I have the cure, the actual cure for the mutations. I have isolated the viral structure. I can reverse the process. I can save people." That made me pause for a second. "Bullshit." Cain smiled. Even at this distance, I could see it. "It is not bullshit. It is science. I have been studying this virus for months, since before it was released. I know how it works. I know how to stop it. But I need territory. I need people. I need skilled leaders who understand survival. Join me, and everyone here lives. Everyone gets cured. Everyone survives this." I thought about it. For about 3 seconds. Number Cain's smile faded. "That is disappointing. I was hoping you would be reasonable. I was hoping we could do this the civilized way. I am very reasonable. Reason says you are full of shit. Reason says you are a murderer who experiments on refugees like they are lab rats. Reason says whatever you are building, it is not worth joining. So no, get off my mountain." "Then you have chosen poorly, Mr. Thorne." Cain gestured. His men raised their weapons in perfect synchronization, professional, trained. "Dangerous. Shadow," I yelled. Now, the pack lunged forward from their hidden positions in the trees, hitting Cain's men from the flanks where they weren't expecting attack. 10 wolves moving with coordinated precision that made them seem like 20, going for legs and throats and weapon hands. Not to kill necessarily, to disrupt, to break the formation, to create chaos. My men opened fire from the defensive positions we had built, positions that gave them cover and elevation, controlled bursts, aimed shots, ammunition discipline. David had trained them well over the past weeks. Cain's forces responded professionally, regrouped faster than I had hoped. They had body armor, automatic weapons that could put out more rounds per minute than our hunting rifles. They had training, but they hadn't expected the wolves. Hadn't prepared for animal tactics mixed with human planning. 3 of Cain's men went down in the first 30 seconds, torn apart by wolves or shot from concealed positions. The rest fell back to cover, started targeting the wolves specifically. One of Shadow's pack, a young male I had watched play with Tyler just yesterday, got hit by automatic fire. Then another wolf. The pack fell back, regrouped, but they had taken casualties. Cain himself had retreated to a safe position behind his men, watching the battle like it was a chess game he was analyzing, calculating odds, planning moves, learning our tactics. The fight lasted 20 brutal minutes. We held our defensive positions, but barely. Cain's forces probed our defenses, tested them, learned them quickly. Then they pulled back in an organized retreat, not running, just withdrawing. Strategic, controlled, professional. Cain's voice carried across the distance one more time before they disappeared into the darkness. I will be back, Mr. Thorne. And next time, I will not offer mercy. Next time, I will take what I need. Then they were gone, fading back into the trees and shadows like they had never been there. We counted casualties. 2 of Shadow's pack were dead, bodies cooling in the snow. 3 of my men were wounded, one critically with a chest wound that was bleeding too much. We had survived the first attack, but it had been close, too close. I looked at David, who had a cut across his forehead but was otherwise intact. He will be back soon, with more men better prepared. He learned everything he needed to know about our defenses. What do we do? David asked. I thought about it. Thought about running, abandoning the settlement, heading deeper into the mountains where Cain couldn't follow. Thought about my father and the truck and the tree and giving up when things got hard. Thought about Tyler. About the 22 men who had trusted me enough to stay. About Shadow and Kodiak. About Pack. We prepare, I said. We fortify everything we have built. We get ready, because when he comes back, we are going to end this, one way or another. We had 4 days. Shadow's remaining pack ranged far, tracking Cain's movements through the wilderness, bringing back information I interpreted from their behavior and the patterns of their howls. Cain was regrouping at his facility somewhere to the south, gathering more men, more weapons, preparing for a full assault. ATA. 4 days. We used every second of those 4 days. I redesigned our entire defensive system. Not just trenches and stakes anymore, though we expanded those. Kill zones with overlapping fields of fire. Choke points that forced attackers into predetermined paths. Fallback positions if the outer perimeter was breached. Multiple layers of defense, each one harder to crack than the last. We were outnumbered and outgunned, but we had home terrain advantage. I was going to use every inch of it. David organized construction crews that worked around the clock in shifts. We built barricades using logs and packed snow, created elevated firing positions that gave us height advantage, built covered approaches so we could move between defensive points without being exposed. One man who had been an engineer before everything fell apart, designed a system of tripwires connected to alarms made from cans filled with rocks. Low-tech but effective as hell. We also prepared escape routes in case everything went to shit. Hidden paths through the trees marked with subtle signs only we would recognize. Emergency caches of supplies along those routes. Food, water, medical equipment, ammunition. If we had to run, at least we would have a chance. Shadow and the remaining 8 pack members were integrated fully into our defense plan. I showed the men the wolves' patrol patterns in detail, taught them to recognize different howl signals and what they meant, explained how to coordinate with the pack during combat without getting in each other's way. Tyler wanted to help fight. I said no, he argued. For a 10-year-old, he had impressive debate skills and more balls than sense. I can shoot, he said, chin up, defiant. My dad taught me. I am a good shot. You are 10 years old. I am old enough to die if Cain wins. I am old enough to fight. I looked at him, looked at his eyes, old beyond his years, aged by trauma and loss. Thought about my own father teaching me to shoot when I was 7, putting a Remington in my small hands and saying the world was dangerous, and I needed to know how to survive it. Fine, I said after a long moment, but you stay in the most protected position we have. You are last resort defense only, meaning you only shoot if everything else has already failed, and the enemy is literally at your door. Understood? Yes, sir. And Tyler, if I give you the order to run, to take the escape route and save yourself, you run. No arguments. No heroics. You run, and you survive. That is an order. Yes, sir. On the 3rd day of preparation, something unexpected happened. More people arrived at our settlement. Not refugees running away from danger. People running toward it, running to help. They had heard about us through the radio network that still functioned sporadically. About the settlement that stood up to Cain and survived. About the mountain man with wolves who was building something worth protecting. 6 men arrived that morning, all armed, all with experience fighting mutations, or worse. "You don't know us," one of them said. His name was James, former Marine. I could tell from the way he moved, the way he held his rifle, the way his eyes scanned for threats. "But Cain needs to be stopped. We heard you are making a stand. We want to stand with you." I looked at them, looked at David, who shrugged like it was my call, looked at Shadow, who had assessed the newcomers and showed no aggression, which was as close to approval as I would get from a wolf. "You fight with us. You follow my orders without question or delay," I said. "No exceptions, no debates, no democracy. This is my territory and I give the commands." "Yes, sir. That works for us." We were 28 now, plus Tyler, against Cain's force of probably 50, maybe more. Still bad odds, but better than they had been. And these new arrivals had combat experience that most of my people lacked. That mattered. On the 4th day, as the sun was setting and the temperature dropping to -30, like the universe was conspiring to make everything harder, Shadow howled the alarm. They were coming. The attack started with an explosion, not close to our settlement. Maybe half a mile south. Just a boom echoing through the valley, loud enough to shake snow from trees and make the ground vibrate. A distraction, psychological warfare. Cain was announcing his presence, trying to make us nervous and reactive. It worked. Everyone tensed. Tyler was moved to the most interior structure with 3 guards now instead of 2. Kodiak stayed with him, loyal to the end. Shadow and the remaining pack positioned at the southern approach, ready to fight. My men spread out to assign defensive positions, weapons ready, hearts pounding. I climbed to the roof of the main cabin. Highest vantage point we had, rifle ready. Watched the tree line through the scope. Cain's forces came just after full dark. Not a frontal assault, which would have been suicide. Professional tactics. Small teams, multiple approach vectors, probing for weaknesses in our defenses. They had night vision equipment, military-grade gear that let them see in darkness while we were half blind. Body armor, automatic weapons. This wasn't some random attack, this was war. But we were ready. The first team hit the eastern approach, moving quiet and fast, tripped our alarms, got caught in a kill zone we had designed specifically for this. Shadow's pack hit them from behind, while my men fired from elevated positions with muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness. 3 of Cain's men down in the first minute. The rest pulled back fast, professional retreat. The second team came from the west, hit our trenches filled with stakes, found them the hard way. 1 fell through screaming. The others pulled back, regrouped. Shadow was already moving to intercept with half the pack. Third team tried the north, the direction I had expected them to focus on eventually. Met David and the former Marines with concentrated, disciplined fire. They took cover, returned fire with automatic weapons. Stalemate for now. Cain was smart. Very smart. He would send 3 teams to test our defenses, learn our patterns, map our capabilities. The real assault would come once he understood our layout completely. He was willing to sacrifice men to gather intelligence. I scanned the tree line with my rifle scope, looking for Cain himself. Found him 200 yards out, behind his men, watching through binoculars from safety, commanding from a distance. Coward. I took aim. At this distance, in this cold, with this wind, it was a difficult shot, but possible. I started to squeeze the trigger. Then I saw what he was holding. Not binoculars. An injector, large, industrial-sized, filled with yellowish liquid that glowed slightly in the darkness. He was going to release mutations, use infected animals as weapons, drive them at our settlement, while his men provided supporting fire. "David," I yelled down from the roof. "North wall. He has got infected. Get ready." Too late. Cain pressed a trigger. A pneumatic hiss carried across the snow. Something launched into the air in an arc, landed about 100 yards from our perimeter. Then another launcher fired. Then 3 more in rapid succession. The injectors shattered on impact. Yellowish liquid sprayed across the snow, across the trees, and from the forest, drawn by scent or sound or some signal. Cain was broadcasting they came, mutated animals, dozens of them. Deer with twisted antlers like weapons, elk with red eyes and impossible speed, mountain lions moving in coordinated packs of 15, even 2 massive bears, 12 feet tall, with claws like swords, all headed straight for us. "Everyone to the walls," I yelled. "Shadow, fall back to inner perimeter. Let them hit the traps first." The mutations charged across the clearing at full speed. Hit our first line of defenses hard. The trenches, the stakes, the tripwires. Half of them went down immediately, impaled or crippled or caught, but half made it through. My men opened fire. Controlled bursts at first, conserving ammunition. Then sustained fire as the mutations just kept coming. Wave after wave. The sound was deafening. Rifles cracking like thunder, men shouting coordinates and targets, animals screaming in pain and rage. Shadow and the pack engaged the ones that broke through our outer defenses, bringing them down with coordinated attacks that were beautiful and brutal. But there were too many. We were being overrun despite our preparations. Then Cain's men attacked while we were focused on the mutations. Smart, brutal, effective. They hit our weakened positions with professional precision, using the mutated animals as cover and distraction. I shot one of Cain's soldiers. Worked the bolt, shot another. But they were advancing, using fire and maneuver tactics, leapfrogging forward with covering fire. Good training, well executed. This was it. This was the moment we either held the line or died trying. Fall back to secondary positions. I yelled. Fighting retreat. Maintain fire discipline. The men responded immediately, pulling back to positions with better cover and better fields of fire, not routing, just retreating in order. David was magnificent, organizing the pullback, keeping everyone coordinated, making sure nobody got left behind. Shadow's pack fought like demons possessed. The wolves were everywhere at once, hitting mutations, hitting Cain's men, creating chaos and fear. 2 more wolves went down, bodies falling in the snow, but they were buying us time with their lives. We fell back to the inner structures, the core of our settlement, barricaded ourselves in positions we had prepared, created overlapping fields of fire where every approach was covered by at least 2 shooters. The mutations were mostly dead or disabled now, bleeding out in the snow. But Cain's men were still advancing, professional and relentless. Then I saw him. Cain himself moving forward now that he thought victory was certain. Cocky. Overconfident. He was carrying something. A large syringe filled with that yellowish liquid, heading toward the structure where Tyler was hidden. "No," I said. Quiet at first. Then louder. "Number." I jumped down from the roof, landed hard enough to jar my knees, ignored the pain. Ran toward Cain through the chaos. Shadow saw me. Understood immediately, broke off from the pack to follow. Cain saw us coming, smiled like he had been waiting for this confrontation, raised the syringe like a weapon. "Mr. Thorne, I was hoping we would meet face to face, one scientist to another, one thinker to another. You are not a scientist. You are a fucking monster who experiments on people. I am a researcher studying the greatest evolutionary event in human history. I am documenting adaptation in real time. And you could be part of it. Think about it. Your strength, your skills, your knowledge, enhanced by the mutation. Imagine what you could become." He lunged forward, fast for someone his age and build. I swung the Remington like a club, connected with his shoulder. He stumbled, but recovered faster than expected. Came at me again. The syringe was inches from my neck. Then Shadow hit him, 120 pounds of white wolf moving at full speed with perfect timing. Cain went down hard, the syringe flying from his hand, spinning through the air. Shadow's jaws clamped on Cain's throat, not biting down hard enough to kill, just holding, just controlling. Cain struggled, tried to fight, clawed at Shadow's fur. The wolf growled, a sound that came from somewhere primal and deadly, and Cain went still. I picked up the syringe from where it had landed in the snow. Looked at the yellowish liquid inside, glowing faintly. Looked at Cain, whose confident smile was gone now, replaced by actual fear. "You wanted to see what mutations could do," I said. "You wanted to study evolutionary adaptation. Let's give you some first-hand experience." "Wait," Cain said, voice shaking for the first time. "Wait, we can make a deal. I have information, resources, the cure formula. I have it written down, documented. I stabbed the syringe into his neck, pushed the plunger. All of it. Every drop of that yellowish poison." Cain's eyes went wide. Shadow released him and backed away fast. Instinct telling the wolf to get clear. "Shadow, get back to the pack," I said. "This is about to get ugly." The wolf hesitated for 1 second, then turned and ran back toward the defensive positions. Cain was already changing, his eyes turning red like fire, his body spasming and convulsing, his voice screaming and then changing into something that wasn't human anymore. Something that had never been human. The mutation took him in under a minute. Fast, complete, irreversible. He rose up. No longer Victor Cain. No longer a person with thoughts and plans and evil intentions. Just a monster with red eyes and murder in its mutated DNA. "Hey," I said, raising the Remington to my shoulder, "over here." The thing that had been Cain turned toward me, charged with inhuman speed. I shot it in the head. Once, clean shot. It dropped like a puppet with cut strings. "That is for the refugees," I said to the corpse. "That is for everyone you experimented on. That is for thinking you could come to my mountain and take what is mine." Around me, Cain's men were retreating. Their leader was dead, turned into a monster and then killed. They had lost the stomach for this fight. They ran for the trees, and my men let them go because we were all too tired and too shot up to chase. We had won barely, but we had won. I stood there in the snow, surrounded by bodies both human and animal, and realized I was shaking. Not from cold. From adrenaline and fear and relief and a dozen other emotions I couldn't name. Shadow appeared beside me. The wolf was bleeding from multiple wounds, limping worse than usual, exhausted beyond measure, but alive. Kodiak came running from Tyler's shelter, the dog barking his head off, so relieved I hadn't died that he knocked me over when he jumped up. I lay in the snow with a husky on my chest and a wolf sitting beside me, and started laughing. Couldn't help it. We had just fought off 50 armed men and dozens of mutated animals, and we were somehow still alive. "We are insane," I told them. "All of us. Completely fucking insane." Kodiak licked my face enthusiastically. Shadow's tail wagged slowly. Around us, my men were cheering. We had held our ground. We had survived. Against a force that should have destroyed us, we had won. The aftermath took days to fully process. We had lost 6 men in the fighting, 6 people who had trusted me to keep them safe, who had fought and died for a settlement we had built together. We buried them in the frozen ground with full honors, whatever that meant anymore. Tyler cried at the memorial service. First time I had seen him cry since he had arrived. I think it was good for him, healthy, necessary. Shadow's pack was down to 5 wolves. Out of the original 12, 7 had died protecting this settlement. Protecting us. We buried them next to the humans because that felt right. Same ground, same respect, same sacrifice. Cain's facility was found a week later by refugees who had escaped it during the confusion of his attack on us. They liberated 40 people he had been holding for experiments. Most were too damaged to recover fully, minds broken by what he had done to them. But they were free. That mattered. Word spread through the radio network faster than we expected. The mountain settlement that stood against Victor Cain and won. The man with wolves who had killed the monster who experimented on people. Survivors started coming, asking if they could join us. We took the ones who could work, who could fight, who understood that this wasn't civilization anymore. This was survival with rules. The settlement grew. 40 people by the end of the second month after Cain's defeat. 50 by the third. We had to expand again, build more structures, develop more sophisticated systems for water and food and defense. David became essential, basically my second in command in everything. Tyler grew up fast, became one of our best scouts despite his age. And the mutations. They continued. The virus didn't stop just because we had killed one evil man, but it stabilized over time. The mutations stopped getting worse. Animals adapted to their new forms, found equilibrium. Some died. Some survived. Nature finding its new normal. We survived too. 4 months after I met Shadow, I stood on a ridge overlooking the valley, watching spring finally arrive. The snow was melting at last, revealing ground that hadn't seen sunlight in 8 months. The creek was running full and loud with melt water. And overhead, I saw something I hadn't seen since before the virus. Ptarmigans. Regular ones, not mutated. Just little white birds flying in formation, looking for mates and territory and the chance to build nests. Life. Normal life. Continuing, despite everything. Shadow stood beside me. Fully healed now except for the permanent limp and the scar across its ribs. Strong and confident and alert. Kodiak was sprawled in a patch of actual grass that had emerged from under the snow, sun on his face, snoring contentedly like he didn't have a care in the world. Behind us, down the hill, the settlement was alive with activity. People working, laughing, living. Tyler was teaching some of the younger refugees how to track, passing on skills his father had taught him. David was leading a construction crew on another expansion. Someone was playing music, some old song I didn't recognize, but that sounded like hope. We did it, I said to Shadow. We actually fucking did it. The wolf looked at me with those pale blue eyes, huffed once. Obviously. Okay, you did most of it. And the pack. And Kodiak. Happy now. Shadow's tail wagged. Much better. I reached down, ran my hand through the wolf's thick white fur. Shadow leaned into it, accepting the affection, comfortable with touch in a way that would have been impossible 6 months ago. 6 months ago. This was a wild alpha, starving and desperate. Now it was my partner, my friend, my pack. Kodiak woke up, saw us having a moment, and immediately inserted himself between us with typical husky drama. Rough, rough, rough. He says he was essential too, and we are not giving him enough credit, I translated. Shadow made that laughing sound, soft chuffing noise, and he says you are being dramatic and demanding attention, Rough. Now he is deeply offended. I looked at both of them, dog and wolf, sitting with me on a ridge, watching spring return to the mountains. My pack. My family, strange and unexpected as that was. Shadow, I said. Call the pack. Let them know we are still here. The wolf stood, looked at me questioningly, asking if I was sure. Go ahead. Call them. Shadow threw back its head and howled, long, mournful, beautiful. The kind of howl that carried for miles across mountains and valleys. The kind that said, we are here. We are alive. This is our territory. From the valley below, the rest of the pack answered, 5 voices joining Shadow's, creating a chorus that echoed off the peaks. Kodiak, not to be left out, barked, loud and proud and completely unmusical. I laughed. That is right, buddy. All of us. We are all pack. And standing there on that ridge, watching my impossible settlement below, listening to wolves and a dog declare their territory to the mountains, I thought about my father. He had isolated himself when the world hurt him, drove into that tree rather than face another day of pain and betrayal. I had spent 38 years following his example, convinced he was right about everything, convinced that isolation was safety, that people couldn't be trusted, that women were the source of all pain. Then an apocalypse happened, and a white wolf offered itself to save its pack, and I learned something my father never understood. Survival isn't about being alone. It is about finding your pack and fighting for them, even when it is hard, even when it hurts, even when every instinct says to run and hide and protect yourself above all else. Come on, I said to Shadow and Kodiak. Let's go home. We walked down the ridge together toward the settlement. The sun was warm. The grass was green. And from below, I could hear Tyler laughing at something, the sound carrying across the valley like a promise of better days. The world had ended. But maybe, just maybe, we were building something better from the wreckage, or at least something worth fighting for. And for now, in this moment, with my pack around me and spring finally here, that was enough. Number author's note: I have been thinking about wolves for longer than is probably healthy. Not the romanticized version we see in movies where they are either noble spirits or evil monsters depending on the needs of the plot. Real wolves, the ones who hunt in coordinated packs using tactics refined over thousands of years. The ones who communicate through howls and body language that we are only beginning to understand. The ones who will sacrifice themselves for their family without hesitation or second thought. The ones who have survived alongside humans since the beginning, sometimes as enemies, sometimes as allies, always as equals. This story came from a simple question I asked myself one morning. What would it take for a human to earn a wolf's trust? Not domestication, which is what we did with dogs over tens of thousands of years. Not training, which is manipulation. Trust. Real trust. The kind that goes both ways and costs both sides something. The kind where both parties risk everything, where both sides give up control, where both sides choose to work together, because it is better than working alone, even though working alone is safer and simpler. Eli Thorne started as my exploration of toxic isolation, of what happens when someone gets hurt so badly by betrayal that they completely withdraw from human connection, who convinces himself that animals are better than people because animals cannot lie or cheat or betray, which is true, but also incomplete and ultimately self-destructive. Animals cannot lie, but they also cannot choose. They cannot look at you and decide, consciously and deliberately, to trust you despite all their instincts screaming otherwise. That is what Shadow does. Shadow chooses Eli, chooses to work with him, chooses to protect him, chooses to save him again and again. And those choices, those conscious decisions by a wild animal to partner with a human, are what begin to break through the walls Eli has built around himself. The apocalypse setting came later. Once I had the core relationship figured out, I wanted high stakes where isolation genuinely seemed like the smart choice, where trusting others, letting people in, building community, all seemed like dangerous mistakes that would get you killed. Because that is when the theme really matters. When it is hard, when it costs you something, when every logical calculation says to protect yourself and fuck everyone else. The mutations were inspired by real science about ancient viruses trapped in permafrost combined with my anxiety about climate change. We are living in a time when the impossible seems increasingly likely. When the systems we rely on feel fragile. When the world ending doesn't seem like hyperbole anymore, but like a legitimate possibility we should maybe be preparing for. But this isn't really a story about viruses or mutations or apocalypses or even wolves. It is a story about a man learning that his father was wrong. That isolation isn't safety. It is just a slower form of death. That walls don't protect you from hurt. They just guarantee you will hurt alone. That the only way to survive the really bad shit is to find your pack and hold on to them, even when it is terrifying. Shadow represents everything Eli wishes humans could be: loyal without deception, strong without cruelty, willing to sacrifice without martyrdom or manipulation. And Kodiak represents the everyday reality of connection: annoying, demanding, occasionally ridiculous, but absolutely essential. The settlement that grows around Eli's cabin isn't meant to be utopian or perfect. It is messy, fragile, built on necessity more than ideology, but it works. Because everyone there has chosen it, has decided that working together is better than dying alone. Victor Cain is the villain because he represents weaponized isolation taken to its logical extreme. He has taken survival and turned it into something monstrous. He views people as resources to be exploited, sees mutation as a tool rather than tragedy. He is what Eli could have become if Shadow hadn't appeared. A man so isolated that he has stopped seeing others as human. The ending is deliberately undramatic in some ways. No massive victory celebration, no cure discovered, no restoration of the old world. Just spring coming, and people surviving, and a man standing on a ridge with his dog and his wolf, watching a world that is broken but not dead, that is still capable of beauty, that is still worth fighting for. I wrote this during my own period of isolation, when I had convinced myself that being alone was easier and safer than risking connection. That protecting myself from potential hurt was more important than anything else. The story became my argument with myself, my attempt to believe that opening up, letting people in, building something with others, was worth the inevitable pain. I don't know if I won that argument, but I finished the story. And sometimes that is enough. If you are reading this and you are isolated by choice or circumstance, I want you to know, your father might have been wrong. Mine was. Walls don't protect you from pain. They just make the cold worse. Find your pack, even if it is just one person, one dog, one friend who gets it. Find them and hold on. The world's going to hurt you regardless. Might as well hurt together. Thank you for reading. Thank you for spending time with Eli and Shadow and Kodiak. Thank you for believing, even for a little while, that a man and a wolf could build something worth protecting. Stay warm out there. Find your pack. Hold on tight. Written from a cabin in Colorado, metaphorical. Watching wolves that are definitely real, also metaphorical. Surviving one day at a time, unfortunately literal. Thinking about my father and the lessons he taught me and the ones he got wrong. Grateful for every dog I have ever known. In awe of every wolf I have never met but wish I could.